Почитувани, го следите интервјуто со Џовани Кеслер, поранешен директор на ОЛАФ и обвинител од Италија. Mr. Kessler, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell me something about the work of how you reach the fights against corruption, for example, in Italy from 70s, 80s, that you was in Italy on a really low level till this level that you have, because you have many prosecutors and fighters against corruption right now in European bodies?
I think the key figure for Italy to fight rather widespread and also systemic corruption in the political parties has been the independence of the prosecutors in Italy. By being independent and by their independence being safeguarded by law, prosecutors managed to do successful investigations and to arrive till the highest institutional or political levels, discovering corruption without fearing for consequences on their career and without being politically biased or influenced.
How can be reached, for example, this kind of position? Just goodwill of politicians to take out their hands of prosecutors, or there is just a role of prosecutors that they have to find for their independence?
Of course, it's let's say also a cultural let's say issue and achievement. You need a culture of rule of law, a culture of balance of powers, being both in the, let's say, society, in the judiciary, and in the political world. That's very important. But you need also legal tools in order to safeguard the influence, to safeguard prosecutors and judges from undue but always existing attempts of politically influence them. Sometimes this political influence from outside on investigative judges, prosecutors, and is outspoken, is clear, but most of the time it's subdued. So it's not very visible. It's implicit. So prosecutors and judges must be safeguarded from any possibility of influence on their careers. And this can be done by law, which makes sure that the selection of prosecutors and judges is fair, is not politically biased, is based only on merit, and also by making their career not managed by politicians, not managed by the government, but by self-elected judicial body, and which guarantees that there are no influences from the politics.
We have here, for example, like self-election judiciary bodies, and they are more corrupted than in the moment when politicians and parliament was appointed judges and prosecutors. For example, which are the models, for example, that you have to use in Ukraine, like joint venture model of European models of European Union and the domestic country, domestic jurisdiction, to ensure somehow like independent judges, or just to have winning back that they are going to be independent and people are going to trust in their work?
Yeah, when there is a history of, let's say, corruption, a tradition of corruption, or when there is a large systemic corruption, and when there is a huge mistrust in the possibility of the system itself to auto-transform, some, let's say, special, extraordinary measures are maybe needed in order to guarantee this independence and also to restore trust in the society on the investigative and judicial institutions. One of these extraordinary measures which has been used recently in Ukraine after Maidan is the involvement of international experts or internationals in the selection of key figures of the anti-corruption bodies, and also in the selection, for instance, last few months, in the selection of the specialized anti-corruption judges. So internationals are not reachable by national political pressures because they do not have anything to do with the local politics. Internationals do not have interest or economic interest or family interests in the country, so they cannot be influenced by this way. And so some international involvement of experts in the selection of judges and prosecutors in a country can be helpful, and it has been rather successful in Ukraine, can be helpful in guaranteeing that the selection process of the national authorities is carried out without undue political influences. This is one of the tools. Another tool could be also the involvement of internationals in national investigative bodies, so they can bring their experience working with national officers, and at the same time they are, for the same reasons, less or not at all prone to be addressed by political influence. So let's say an internationalization of some of these national processes in the selection, in the appointment of prosecutions and judicial bodies, and also in carrying out the investigation, could be one of the tools to be used, maybe in a temporary way, for guaranteeing or recreating a bit of trust and in the investigative body.
You have big experience, for example, in establishing this kind of bodies. You was working in Olaf, you was working in Italy during the hottest period fighting against corruption, during 80s, killing of Đovani Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. Yeah. Can you tell us, for example, in that moment something about them as prosecutors? Yeah. And other part, for example, how do they solve this problem with corruption or put it at a lower level?
Yeah, Đovani Falcone and Paolo Borsellino that you just mentioned have been investigative judges and prosecutors who did great work and courageous work fighting mafia in Sicily. And they've been assassinated in a terrible summer in the 90s, and one after the other in a very spectacular way. And their contribution has been not only of setting an example, but their contribution has been, even by their death and assassination, mafia was forced to assassinate them in order to defend itself. But by doing so, mafia exposed itself to what has happened afterwards, to the reaction First of all, of the civil society. It's very interesting what happened that summer after the two assassinations. Civil society in Sicily was shocked and reacted strongly against the government, against the politicians who, in their view, didn't do enough, and it was true, against mafia. And by these reactions of the civil society, not only in Sicily, even in my city in northern Italy, people gathered spontaneously in front of the court buildings. They even, in order to express solidarity and support to judges and prosecutors, and to express the protest against the government who was not doing enough. And after this expression of discontent of the civil society, the government finally put in place, government and parliament put in place the right strong measures against corruption and against organized crime, and which worked. So, but it shows that a country should not need heroes like Borsellino and Falcone, who were real heroes because they put their life at stake in fighting mafia. But it's a very disgraceful country, the country which needs heroes to combat mafia or to combat corruption. You shouldn't need heroes. This should be a normal work of the state to combat this. And it shows that it has been the reaction of the civil society, the spontaneous reaction of the civil society, which has triggered then the right measures, laws, and strong law enforcement, and strong strengthening the tools for prosecution to destroy mafia, which were successful, thanks to the sacrifice and to the good work of the two colleagues.
Which is for you, for example, in this moment, the best model that have Macedonia to choose, North Macedonia to choose, to have quite better fights against corruption? For example, some kind of hybrid model that you make in Ukraine, or some kind of other measures that you have as
There are no fixed models. Each model has to adapt to the situation. Certainly, you mentioned Ukraine, and I would add even Romania. So I would call them not as models, but as two experiences which are not so, let's say, far away from the reality in North Macedonia, even though they are different countries, bigger countries. But actually, both these countries, like others, have faced let's say, after the fall of communism, the remains of a certain mentality, of a certain culture of lack of rule of law, and instead of rule of law, the oligarch system, and in Ukraine, and the political, let's say, justice, like in Romania, and widespread corruption. So, similar situation in a way to the one of North Macedonia, but in both cases there has been a reaction induced in Romania also by the European Union, or supported also by the European Union, but mainly by the civil society. And in both countries, independent investigative structures have been put in place to fight corruption, which started to give good results, especially in Romania, and which have encouraged the civil society to do more, and also to win the cultural battle against corruption.
Okay. Mr. Kessler, thank you for this interview. Почитувани, го следевте интервјуто со господинот Кеслер. Ви благодарам.